Solidarity has released a statement on negotiations between it and FlySafair. Let's unpack this with our reporter Katlego Legodi, who's been monitoring developments there. Katlego, of course, we know that scores of passengers have been left stranded at a number of airports. A number of flights also had been cancelled by FlySafair. Now this statement by Solidarity, what does it say? What does it entail?
Well, these are positive developments, Unati, looking at where the parties were from Friday. Remember that this meeting at the CCMA was set for last Friday, and this is where they could not find each other, and that was a last-ditch attempt by the two parties to find each other under the intervention of the CCMA. The CCMA is guided by the Labour Relations Act, Section 150. That gives them that right to mediate and facilitate some of these negotiations. They too had been worried about some of these developments here to a point whereby the CCMA reached out to both of the parties to say that, you know, to avert further of some of these disruptions and further cancellation of flights, the parties must come back to the table. But remember that the union had said that the employer had been approaching this in bad faith. On Friday, they even alleged that, you know, the employer did not have a quorum. They could not bring the right people that would speak to these issues to the table. So this time around, then they'll be looking at ensuring that at least, you know, they try to find each other under the facilitation of the CCMA. Solidarity had really been stern to say that the employer was undermining even the CCMA that is guided by the Labour Relations Act to intervene here. But now we're looking at them just finding somewhat of a transparent, you know, place to meet because on Friday, this meeting was set at the headquarters of FlySafair in Kempton Park. But now we hear Solidarity saying that it would be prudent then for this particular meeting that will take place, we are told, on Wednesday, would sit at a transparent place so that these parties can then try to find each other.
I mean, what does this then mean for the passenger? You had earlier indicated, of course, that over 20 flights, I do believe, had been cancelled and that passengers would then be refunded, but that would take weeks on end. What does that mean for the passenger at hand at this point in time?
So it means that, you know, more or less they can pin their hopes to this particular process. Most of them would be, you know, following up on that process of refunds and getting refunded their monies. Others would have to move their days to other dates so that they can be accommodated. But also remember, there are alternative, you know, low-cost airlines that they can opt for if they still want to fly. But this would say to us that the shocker that the industry got, because another issue that played itself out was the aviation industry is saying they can't take somewhat of a knock from a 2-week strike action. And now, you know, it does say to us that at least if these parties tend to find each other, this 2 weeks can be cut down to 3 days or even 4 days. Earlier on, I spoke to Solidarity, the Deputy General Secretary, Helgard, and he was saying that there is somewhat of an appetite of some sort to move it from the 10%, 10.5 to 8%. But this would be if the employer comes and negotiate with them in good faith. They're still taking issue with the scheduling and the rostering, the rostering, you know, of the pilots, to say that that is one of the issues that they had even approached the CCMA before the wage negotiations to look into, because they had said that that does not serve their members. But this time around, again, they'll be looking at ensuring that under the facilitation, the transparent facilitation of the CCMA, these parties can find each other. Maybe on Wednesday, we'll be looking at a new figure that is put on the table. But this is bargaining, Unati. It's a give and take. So we can't definitely say that, you know, these parties will find each other on Wednesday. They are going to sit on Wednesday, at least that's positive, and going into Friday and the rest of the week, then they'll assess as to how then these talks, or where these talks lead them in terms of ensuring that they bridge this impasse.
I mean, when we interrogate just some of the concerns even further in terms of the pilots wanting those increases on their packages, we're talking roughly here some captains earning between 1.8 to 2.3 million annually, placing them well over the 1% of earners in this country. And I believe some of them earn more than executive committee at FlySafair. What exactly are some of their problems or concerns? I know earlier on you had mentioned that they also cited a decrease in their earnings during COVID-19. Help us as consumers understand here, just some of those concerns that they are really grappling with.
They don't feel protected. They don't feel that the relationship with the employer is a relationship that would see, them sitting on the table even before going to the CCMA or going to the unions to try by all means to fight for them. They don't see that relationship being healthy because of what happened during the COVID-19 when they took away the 10%. And they're saying that from there, I think most of them had an expectation that the employer will then come back as things start to look up and reverse that removal of the 10% from their salaries. So they're basically saying that they feel really hamstrung by all of these issues and all of these developments. And when you look at it, I mean, you and I, they look at it and say the 1.8 million or the 2.5 million would be a lot. But these are pilots, they're professionals, and one would say if you look at the brackets of what they had studied for and where they find themselves here, they could be justified to ask for even more of their salaries in line with their expectations when they joined the industry. But you hear the airline saying that it's unsustainable because then, another thing that tends to happen when these negotiations take place, you guard against the section 189 that will follow if then you push it all the way up, because then the employer, to be sustainable, will then move to say that I'm cutting their heads. I'm not going to be able to have the boots on the ground, as many of these boots on the ground, so I'm retrenching. So they don't want it to lead to that. And this is something that the employer even mentioned, to say that if we then become unsustainable as an entity, you look at our bottom line and you look at what we're getting from what we make in terms of these routes, then it's going to lead us to more or less, cutting staff. And they're saying that most of the staff that would get affected won't be the pilots. It will be the low earners. It will be those that are, they're basically in the aviation space, cabin crew members and the likes. And they're saying if indeed then, they push it all the way to 10.5%, that they say it leads to even 21.8%. That is what the employer said. It's going to be unsustainable for the airline.
And I know, of course, one of the other areas of contention is the pilot roster system that was implemented by FlySafair at the start of the year. But Katlego, as you monitor those developments for us, thank you so much for your time, of course, Katlego Legodi, really just monitoring those developments and that statement coming out of solidarity back to the drawing board with at the CCMA with the airline. But we'll continue to monitor all of that for you, particularly as it speaks to those that are flying and those that actually need their refunds to be returned to them.